for the county over the next 20 years. If you remember last time, the transportation class came and essentially listened to the variety of issues and opportunities that you were identifying related to transportation needs. And the students basically from this capstone are back, and you'll see them here tonight. And they're going to share with you some data that they found and some potential goals related to transportation needs, as well as some initial recommendations based on what they heard from you. So we're going to have essentially a 20-minute presentation. So feel free, task force members and folks, you can feel free to turn off your cameras, grab a snack if you would like while the students present. Be thinking about what is feasible and what makes sense for Comanche County. And then after the presentation, we're going to come back. We're going to ask you if you're able to turn back on your video, and we will spend the remainder of the hour, so about 40 minutes or 35 minutes, having a deeper discussion about what you heard and additional ideas or opportunities there might be. Are there any questions related to the agenda? Okay, so we will go ahead and roll with it. Who's going to share the screen? The students? Okay, so I know we have a couple intro slides on there. Just talking about the agenda, we can move through that quickly, and y'all can go ahead and get started.
Can you all see, I guess, the presentation?
Yes.
Right. So I guess the little starting notes,
yeah, if you wanna,
microphone and stuff like that.
You can skip through those first couple slides. I kind of went over those things.
So good afternoon, everyone. Today we'll be presenting the land assessment and transportation sections of the comprehensive plan for Comanche County. My name is Simon, and I am a Master's of Engineering student here at Texas A&M.
Hi, my name is Tristan Fisher, and I am a Master's of Urban Planning student here at A&M.
My name is Zhihan. I'm a Urban Planning Master's student in Texas A&M.
Hi, my name is Bhavya Iyer, and I'm a Master of Urban Planning student at A&M.
Hi, my name is Eddie, and I'm a Master of Urban Planning student at A&M.
So here's a brief overview of the topics we'll be talking about today, starting with existing conditions, land assessment, transportation, recommendations, maintenance schedule, and concluding with the next steps for this project. So existing conditions. To begin, a little overview of Comanche County based on the US Census from 2019. It is estimated that the total population was about 13,635. Most of the working population does depend on private vehicles or carpooling as a means to get to and from work, with minimal, roughly 1.7%, depending on walking or other means of transportation. This correlates directly with vehicle ownership, as most households do own at least one vehicle, with most owning two or more. The majority of those living in Comanche County can get to work in under an hour, with those who require greater times most likely working outside of the county. So for functional classification, an arterial is a type of road classification which focuses on mobility and less on access, where collectors focus more on access and less on mobility. The only principal arterials classified by TxDOT in Comanche County are US 67 and State Highway 6, with SH 36 or State Highway 36 being the only minor arterial. Most of the collectors, such as major and minor collectors in Comanche County, are county roads and farm to market roads. One important classification is that US 67 and State Highway 6 are both freight corridors for TxDOT, both of which have roughly a 20% heavy truck traffic composition, indicating that pavement maintenance may be more common. The busiest roads in Comanche County are US 67 and State Highways 6, 16, and 36, all of which at some point exceed over 2,500 vehicles per day, according to the TxDOT statewide planning map from 2019. Many of the roadways within Comanche County are anticipated to see a growth of between 10 and 20% within the next 20 years. Most of the, high daily traffic counts are located within the cities, especially in Comanche. For example, State Highway 16 only exceeds 2,500 vehicles once it touches Comanche, but for the rest of the, stretch of it, north and south of Comanche, it's generally between 500 to 1,000 vehicles. And according to the TxDOT Crash Records Information System, or CRIS, a total of 1,039 crashes were observed over a 5-year period between 2016 and 2020. As you can see to the table on the right, there's a sudden increase in crashes between 2017 and 2018. While the fatal crashes remained relatively consistent in numbers, the number of serious injuries did increase after 2017. And I'll now pass it on to Tristan to talk about land assessment.
Sorry, I was muted. All right. Before we get into the transportation section of our presentation, I'm going to be discussing the land assessment that we came up with for Comanche County. All right. So here we've gone ahead and prepared for you the current land cover for Comanche County. The following map was produced using data from the National Land Cover Database, and it was most recently collected by the U.S. Geographical Survey in 2016. So as you can see, the current land cover for Comanche County is dominated by herbaceous vegetation, also by shrub growth and also hay and pasture areas. As of 2016, about 88% of the county's land cover was made up of vegetation. 34% of this was accounted for herbaceous vegetation alone. Interestingly enough, as you can see from the figure here, a majority of the vegetation north of State Highway 36 is made up of herbaceous vegetation, while the southern area of the county is made up mostly of shrub and forested areas. The county's almost 3% of wetlands and water bodies are primarily made up of Proctor Lake, which you can see centrally located on the map here. So moving on from here, I'm going to discuss the county's community facilities. Okay, so displayed here are the current major community facilities for Comanche County. There is one major healthcare facility located along State Highway 16, which is the county's only fully serviced hospital. It includes both a pharmacy and a public health outreach service. The county houses 4 main school districts that contain a total of 9 different schools that administer to elementary, junior high, and high schoolers. Addressed in further detail here in just a moment, Comanche County is also home to several public parks, a majority of which are located around Proctor Lake. But a few of these parks are also scattered throughout the city limits of both the city of Comanche and also De Leon. Current access to most community facilities is excellent, with ease of access to both parks and schools throughout the entire county. However, with a few volunteer fire stations located away from major roadways and also the main healthcare center sandwiched in between 2 cities, there are new opportunities that we've seen for new connections to and from these facilities. In the next slide, I'm going to go over some of the community assets. So apart from the public facilities that we just discussed, we found it helpful to also map out other trip generation and attraction points, including economic drivers such as ranches and dairies, along with tourist attractions such as vineyards and museums, as you can see here on the map. This point data was collected using Google Maps, and hopefully it illustrates the great need to support these economic drivers of the community. We anticipate with the traffic volume required to serve these industries that more regular road maintenance will be required, along with a new need for widening some potential roadways near these facilities. Also, where necessary, we'll be recommending intersection improvements that may better serve these facilities. Our next step is to analyze these community assets on a parcel level. And so hopefully in the future, we'll actually have this mapped out on a parcel level where you can see those more easily, and we'll be able to better give recommendations. Okay, so here, as mentioned earlier, the city's here are the parks that I mentioned earlier. So the cities of Comanche County the cities of Comanche and De Leon enjoy a few number of small parks that are spread out throughout the community. However, the county's largest cluster of recreational parks, as I mentioned, are located around Proctor Lake. And these offer fishing, hiking, walking trails, boat ramps, picnic spots, camping facilities, the works. Apart from parkland, the area includes also a country club and RV park. And there's also a great number of residential subdivisions nearby. These scenic qualities of the lake make it one of the great interest areas for potential recreational trail improvements for the parks, along with residential development outside of the cities of Comanche and De Leon. Next slide. So moving now into land suitability, I feel like it's important for me to first discuss our process on how we determine the most suitable land for new development in the county. Just as a disclaimer, this is not the final land suitability analysis we will be conducting. As we receive more community feedback, a more in-depth analysis will be used to determine suitability for specific types of developments. Listed here are 4 suitability maps that we have already created and that we're going to be including in our land assessment chapter. And also I've listed here all the different types of suitability factors that we used. And so the 4 different maps that we've come up with so far are the ideal development suitability, the suitability of highway proximity, community facility suitability, and also community asset suitability. And then, as you can see listed there on the left side of that chart, I've listed out all of the different suitability factors that we took into consideration. So we used land cover, proximity to highways, community facilities, and community assets, and also parks. And then you can see there the different types of facilities and assets and all of their percentages that we used for each of those individual maps. On the next slide, I'll be discussing the ideal development suitability we created. So this map illustrates the areas that are most fit for future development, along with areas that are most suitable for improved connectivity. First, we determined land cover would account for 40% of suitability due to wanting to favor classifications of open undeveloped areas, and also low developed areas. We wanted to avoid heavily wooded and reservation areas as well. We also selected proximity to community facilities, assets, and parks, as all displayed in the previous graphics. The idea behind this was not to suggest that development should at all times be located near all of these dark green areas on this map. However, to show that they are favored in terms of development in general. So our next step is to create more suitability maps that will distinguish between ideal new development areas and also areas that require no future development, but instead we see have a need for future maintenance procedures that could really assist those community assets. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand it off to Eddie now, who will be discussing the transportation section of our work.
I think that's my section, but it's fine. I'll talk about transportation now. So most of the proposed projects by TxDOT involve preventative maintenance, such as seal coating the asphalt pavement to extend its life. 2 of the main projects that are happening in the near future are the expansion of State Highway 36 from Comanche to Custine into a Super 2 highway, which is a type of highway with intermittent passing lanes on either side. And US 67 is expected to also be widened from Comanche eastward, most likely into a 4-lane facility with 2 lanes per direction. From the previous task force meetings and introduction to project meeting, the needs and priorities of Comanche County include developing transportation infrastructure to support the growing industries such as solar and wind farms, dairies, and processing plants, solving the issues of flooding of roadways, most notably in the southeast area of the county due to heavy rain and overflow from Proctor Lake. Other issues include paving of county roads, upgrading the base material, widening paved roads to facilitate passing maneuvers, and the addition of rumble strips to reduce accidents, facilitating turning movements and visibility at intersections to reduce crashes, and additional east-west connectivity. Some of the limitations to meeting some of these needs and priorities, as mentioned, include the funding within the county and the limited right-of-way with utility conflicts, specifically cell phone towers. I'll pass it on to Eddie, who will talk about some of our proposed recommendations.
All right, I'll be speaking about recommendations. On the next slide, you can see the goals that have been identified so far by the task force. These include improving safety and connectivity, leveraging the county's assets to support growth, and meeting alternative transportation needs. Goal setting is the broadest and the first step in creating a plan with specific objectives and action items identified as the process evolves. The first goal of improving safety and connectivity includes several elements. The task force identified the need to eliminate hazards as a priority. Current concerns include flooding, especially below Proctor Lake, poor visibility at some points on the road network, and insufficient pavement widths for passing, especially on county roads. So hazardous intersections, bridges, and curves should be redesigned. The county will also need to acquire additional right-of-way along county roads. A longer-term objective is to improve east-west connectivity, particularly between the medical center and the northwestern part of the county. And the foundation of this goal is engagement with stakeholders from all parts of the county and community to really make sure that all the local issues are identified and included in the planning process. The second goal is focused on using the transportation network to support the county's economic growth, targeting road improvements or infrastructure improvements around activity centers, such as wind and solar farms and dairies, which see larger amounts of trucks. Additionally, the plan should realize the potential of recreational assets in the county, such as Proctor Lake. This could include adding trails, improving bike facilities, and access to recreation areas from highways. And again, this goal also will depend on stakeholder input, including people planning major investments in the county, such as wind farms or dairies, just to give some examples. And finally, meeting alternative transportation needs was identified by the task force as an important priority. Ensuring that students can access extracurricular activities and services, and that elderly populations also have adequate transportation options. Since the county is primarily dominated by personal vehicle transportation, there may be a need to improve public transportation and options for pedestrians and cyclists, which can additionally promote a healthy lifestyle for youth. So this process will continue with engagement as a key foundation. So one of the longer term objectives, which we have just decided to summarize here, is the need for additional east-west connections, particularly serving the medical center. So we've provided 4 concepts for alternative east-west corridor improvements. The first 2 are within the city of Comanche on existing alignments. The third alternative is closer to the medical center and requires more new alignment. And the fourth alternative is in the northern part of the county on the existing FM 587. So on this slide, you'll see the 2 alternatives in the city of Comanche, which are existing 2-lane paved roads. Alternative 1, Wrights Avenue, has lane markings and is
taking care of that. We called the county clerk's office. They're sending us the deed And
So,
they're sending us the
Juvenile, I'll mute you.
death certificate.
Okay, Juvenile muted. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll just I'll wrap up this slide by saying that these two routes are existing roads, but there may be opportunities to improve signage and intersections. The second alternative, the second alternative is closer to the industrial park, but does not extend to State Highway 36, while the first alternative connects both highways, but has more homes and businesses along it. Sorry, if we go to the next slide, this is our third alternative, closest to the medical center, which was identified as a key item on the wish list. And this corridor has gravel county roads with narrow right-of-way and sharp turns. So there was a desire identified for a road with less curves, more space for passing, and a more direct route. And finally, the fourth alternative, which proceeds west from De Leon, involves upgrades to the existing FM 587 and potentially upgrades to north-south routes such as FM 2247. These are some potential cross sections like the east-west corridor concepts. These are really just concepts designed to get your feedback, and they're not a specific proposal as of yet. But as you can see, the concepts for principal arterials include standard lane widths and shoulders with provisions for passing. This is subject to TxDOT standards. So again, just to stress that these are some concepts. And on the next slide, you can see some concepts for the more minor roads, such as farm to market roads and county roads. And within the cities, mostly Comanche and De Leon, but also Gustine and potentially smaller communities, provisions for pedestrians and cyclists may be necessary to incorporate along with existing vehicle facilities. We've provided a quick example overview of the maintenance schedule that should be implemented. Stakeholder engagement identified a need for regular maintenance and a number of actions to improve safety and road conditions in general. This is just an example showing how these actions could tie into our goals and the rough cost and schedule associated. So, sorry, the next steps here are really to continue working with you to refine the objectives and to identify any priority projects. Again, we want to make sure that all communities and all parts of the county are represented in this planning process. And we want to hear from you. So with that in mind, we'd like to open this meeting to hear your feedback.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. So what we're wanting to do now is open this up for discussion, and we definitely want to get your thoughts on some of the goals and recommendations. Before we do that, can the students answer any clarifying questions for you about the data that they presented? Do you have any questions related to that? Okay, Well, if there aren't any burning questions to start, then we can just go ahead and jump in. We can keep the slides up if you would like us to go back to a specific slide. And whoever would like to jump in first, we can start that discussion. I think, Laverne, are you trying to talk? We can't hear you. Okay, I get Laverne, we still can't hear you. So if you want to put something in the chat box or call in on your phone, there is a landline in the link or in the email we sent. So are there any things about the recommendations that that stood out to you, that you agree with, that you're concerned about?
Do you guys mind going back to the slide about the recommendations?
Yeah, let's go back. And you're speaking specifically about the goals? Or are you looking at, would like to look at the map?
Actually, I just wanted to go back to it and see for overview purposes if I had any questions.
Okay.
I think one thing that's important to point out, at least on the target improvements around the economic activity centers and industries, including wind and solar farms, with that portion, I think I can kind of speak to where that came from. We have indication that there is potential or possibility that we will be having new wind or solar farms pop up in even the counties that are close to us, not even necessarily our county, but the county that is south to us in Mills County. And so this was based on the fact that those wind blades and those portions and parts of the solar farms and of the wind turbines would have to be passing through our county on our highways to get to their destination, even if the destination is not our county. So that was, I believe, a basis for that. If we have Comanche County people on here that are wondering about our economic activity centers, you know, and we do have a potential solar farm and wind or solar farm activity, you know, that might be on the table in the future for Comanche County. We don't know yet. I know that there are some that have approached the school boards and stuff, but pieces and parts of it are going to be moving through Comanche County, regardless of whether it's our county or another one. So our highways definitely, you know, it's an accommodation factor to think about. Are highways wide enough to accommodate all of this that's about to come down the road, literally?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I was actually curious about, that's really just the installation is the impact. And I was wondering about the sort of long-term, impacts.
This is Anna Wallman. I just had a quick question on the options for access to the medical center. Were there any rough dollar amounts put on any of these options as to how much they would cost?
That's a good question. I'm going to pose that to the students.
To be perfectly honest, we're still at a fairly early stage in the process, and we haven't really looked too deeply into that because there, along with potentially some variation due to the alignment, there's the question of what would be the most effective way to pay for it. So those are questions to certainly that we'll be looking at as the process goes on. But our first step was to try and present some concepts and then get to the specifics as we refine those concepts.
Okay, thanks.
And speaking to that, that was, Anna, one of the things that was like a complete wish dream list, that, you know, the hospital being there, many of the patients are transported to Abilene Regional via Highway 36. And as you can tell, the ambulances have to either come all the way back to Comanche to get on Highway 36 to go, or go all the way to De Leon and cut over on 587. And so having a more direct shot to Highway 36 is something just a complete wish or dream.
Yeah, right. I understand. I just didn't know if there were any rough numbers just to see what even ballpark we were looking in.
I think that could be something that perhaps there could be some numbers put to, but you know, most likely that might have to come from additional studies, I'd say. Other thoughts?
Were any of these derived from the projects that TxDOT has on their wish list for Comanche County?
It's a good question. Which I'm posing to the students.
So would you be able to repeat that question?
Sure, absolutely. Were any of these recommendations that you guys derived from our conversations, did any of those come from actual wish lists from the Texas Department of Transportation that they had for Comanche County?
So the TxDOT plans for the county seem to reflect, as a few people have talked about, the focus in state planning shifting from connectivity to congestion and safety as main focuses. And so really the main priorities that we identified were the Super 2 conversion to facilitate safer overtaking.
And did any of the safety numbers that you guys, I don't know what slide that was, if it was before or after this, but were any of the safety numbers that you guys derived from TxDOT, were any of those broken down to safety incidents that were caused by congestion or traffic versus distracted driving or anything regarding the structural design of the road itself? Are those fatalities broken down, or those crash frequency statistics broken down any more detailed than that?
I think that there's some, I guess, more detailed statistics, but I think most of it involves distracted driving, alcohol impairment. I think those are the two big categories. There's some involving, I guess, maybe the types of vehicles, like if it's a private vehicle or motorcycle and stuff like that, but it doesn't go too deep into detail. But from the spreadsheet I got from TxDOT, it was mainly on the type or the severity of the injury of the crash, the total numbers. But I think there's a database from Chris that provides more detailed information.
Is it possible to have this data mapped so we can see where some of the hotspots are of the crash data? Is that available for the county?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I think that might help us understand where some of the issues are, and then some of the recommendations that you're making perhaps could be prioritized based on some of that crash data. So I'm curious, any other thoughts about sort of safety connectivity? We might want to go to those sets of goals, that slide with some of the ideas around that goal. And these are obviously pretty broad at this point. But if there are any thoughts on any of these points that they made. Okay, do we want to go to the next set of goal, the next goal? I guess we did talk mostly about this. I'm wondering, there was the map with the dairies and ranches on it. Wondering if there's anything else or a better way to communicate that to make better decisions about road networks and potential improvements.
When you say widening and intersection improvements, also, I know one of the goals of TxDOT was to add turning lanes. I don't know if those would fall within that widening and intersection improvements.
Okay.
Maybe intersection improvements, but.
Yeah, let's add that in the notes for the students.
And passing, I mean, passing lanes and turning lanes are probably part of the widening. That I think maybe being more specific would might be better in that instance. On the maintenance recommendations, did those differentiate between county roads and state highways? I can't remember.
Doesn't look like it. But I think that's something that the students, you would need to kind of parse out. Obviously the county roads for the maintenance schedule, I would imagine would be the priority, unless I'm wrong on that.
Yes, for the rural road, we can basically make a list for the community access. So we can make a list for maintenance, the highest ranges, or some the size is greater, is important to the local economics. So we can do this annually.
Okay, so what I heard was that you will create sort of a maintenance schedule for the rural roads, the county roads, especially as they relate to industrial use, like the farm industrial or agricultural industrial use. I think that's what I heard.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, to follow up on that, on the 20% trucks on the major state highways, what percentage of those are trucks and what percentage of those are commuter vehicles, to see what kind of, the trucks are slower traffic, faster traffic, that kind of stuff, if you could break it down.
I mean, those numbers are from the TxDOT statewide planning map. And so when it's 20% heavy trucks, it's mostly, I guess, 18 wheelers, anything that's, I guess, 3 axles or more, I believe, is their criteria.
So there's not a way to break it off by truck traffic? Is that?
From what I understand, I don't think that TxDOT keeps any public records on that. So I think that that might have to be something we'd have to request if that's even available. Because I know that that's normally measured just through something like counting tubes. And so it's kind of not too readily accessible unless they have video that they record the specific type of truck that passes by.
Okay. Let's see, what else do we need to talk about? Any other things sticking out at you in terms of even some of the recommendations on some of the schematic the street widths and so forth for rural roads, and also the city street widths as a recommendation or as a potential recommendation? Is there anything else you'd like to see in what the students are developing? Is there anything that's missing?
I was curious. Oh, sorry. Someone go ahead.
You can go ahead. I was just going to ask if later on down the road, as they get further through this study, I'm just a numbers person. So do they put numbers to any of the costs for the maintenance and costs for basically all of the improvements, so that it can kind of be looked at and, okay, well, maybe we need to prioritize this over this, but that's going to cost too much. So you can structure it in a way that might work better for the county, depending on how the county receives their funding and everything like that. Are we going to be able to see those numbers? Or, and I know it depends on where you're buying material and things like that, but just some rough estimations.
Yeah, that's a good question. Dr. Isley, I know you're on the line. I don't know if you want to address that.
Sure thing. Be happy to. I would be cautious and probably remiss to have you make any executive decisions on investments based on a plan that you're going to get from students in a semester course. That said, I think we could probably come up, like Eddie has done, some ballpark numbers. Like you see one example he put in the chat box there about the rural roads. But honestly, beyond that, it would be quite difficult for us to do that, to give you anything that I think you would want to, be confident with to take to any kind of an investment. I think that's something where you probably would want to look at doing a little bit more detailed study and doing just a little bit more due diligence on that sort of an investment. And part of that is starts to get a little bit into the weeds. We try in these comprehensive plans and the transportation plan to sort of set that vision and give you an idea of what these larger goals are and what some of the activities might be within those goals. But to get you down to 9 decimal points, I think is a little bit difficult within the plan. And it may not be something that you necessarily want, since it is a bit of a vision and it may be 20 years down the line before some of these things get implemented. A lot of things can change in the energy and transportation sectors to impact a lot of those numbers.
Thank you, Dr. Isaac.
Sorry, probably not the answer you wanted, but.
That's okay, thanks.
As far as the Texas state highways go, can you show me again the focus on State Highway 36?
I guess in regards to what?
The tech stop projects, is that what you're?
Were there any recommendations or any mention of the tech stop projects on State Highway 36 on here?
Yes, I mean, the only thing that I found was the transition to a Super 2 between Comanche and Gustine.
So again, the green is we're looking at construction within 4 years, and the red is construction within 5 to 10 years. Is that what I'm seeing?
So the red is, it's either underway or it begins soon. It's the orange that's 5 to 10 years, which is US 67.
Oh, I'm having a hard time differentiating between those two colors. Okay. Okay. So what was your question, Judge, related to this?
I was just trying to make sure that the 36 was adequately covered in it for sure.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And is there any mention of the, okay, I see 67, which is 377 also from Comanche eastward. So that would be like Comanche to Dublin.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so.
I would say Comanche probably to Hassey because it's widened from Hassey
right.
to county line.
That's right.
And I know we haven't had, I know we only have a few minutes here, so we didn't really, there wasn't any discussion yet on, you know, the recreational assets of Proctor Lake. And I know we had said last time that those are very future looking or wish list items in terms of thinking about trails. But I think we do need to give the students a little bit more direction when we're thinking about meeting those alternative transportation needs. So is there any additional guidance you could give them as they're sort of developing that particular goal around public transit, around additional sort of alternative facilities?
There's not a whole lot of public transit. When I say public transit need, you know, are you talking an increase in providing public transit in those areas specifically?
In the goal of goal 3, I think that the thing was increasing access to medical and educational services, and ensuring students have access, appropriate access through bus services.
In conversations with education and medical stakeholders, we heard that transportation was a real challenge. It was often the thing that was preventing residents from really taking advantage of the resources that there are available. So although there's some transportation available through CARR and through the medical center, and then of course the school districts run school buses during the year, that there are a number of needs that are not being met. So looking at exploring ways to fill those needs.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
This is John Aubrey, and I was just thinking about the development of the lake area, and as far as transportation goes, you've got a couple of good farm to markets that are usually in pretty good shape, but everything else not so much. But the problem with the lake is, it's a Corps of Engineers lake, so you can't have docks, so you can't attract people to the waterfront. There's restrictions on a lot of that property that's going to cause a problem as far as what people normally do on lakes. But I would think that, and this is coming from somebody who's spent a lot of time with the lakefront place there. But I think, with its general location near the hospital, but if it could be kind of a secondary place for recreation, like you can go to the boat dock, you can put a bass boat in, but the recreation is at certain places and points that are connected to the transportation areas that you've got now. Because you have an area close to the hospital and close to a boat dock, that has its own kind of allure to some people, I would think. And a lot of that's rural, all of it's rural. So in the future, you're looking at being able to do some developments outside of these parks. And I think that that will probably answer your transportation problems in that area. That would be my opinion on it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that feedback. Well, I see the time. It has kind of flown by here. So we can wrap up unless there's any additional last points anyone would like to make. Okay, so going forward, just as a wrap up, the students are going to take this feedback and they will be presenting some sort of final set of recommendations at the presentation to the Commissioners Court on April 26th. So we will, there will also be a report that's developed that we can certainly share with you and get additional feedback on. If you, I know this was a lot of information, so as you're thinking about this over the next couple of days and something comes to mind, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to get any additional feedback that you have, and then we'll pass that on to the students. Just for the task force, be mindful in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be pushing out social pinpoint. So we're going to be launching that on March 22nd. We are going to have Facebook ads going in the county to get folks interested in participating on that website. And remember, that'll be a place for folks to put ideas that they have for the county around different topics. And then we are going to push out the paper surveys, and there'll be a link on those paper surveys on April 1st. So those are going in all the utility bills April 1st. And so we've already worked that out with the co-op. So for the city teams, get with me if you need clarification on that. As well as I know we had mentioned the possibility of doing some newspaper ads for the survey. So if we need to go ahead and get that arranged for April 1st to launch those paper surveys, let's talk. And then we'd like to go ahead and get on your calendar May 20th. We would like to have our May task force meeting on May 20th. That focus of that meeting will likely be on housing related issues. We've been collecting data with the Texas A&M Real Estate Center around issues of housing and And so we'll have some great data to share with you on that date. G, did I miss anything? Is there anything else I need to mention?
I think I see some comments about the survey needing some edits. Please feel free to send that edits to us as soon as possible. And yeah, we'll make that changes quickly before we send it out to the newspaper and the co-op. And I want to apologize for the mistake of the Zoom meeting earlier. The Zoom link that you received at 3:33, that's for the housing meeting on May 20th. So do save that. That'll be when the next time we're going to meet as a task force meeting, but that'll be for housing team. Apart from that, we did send you another link today that is going to be for the April 26th Commissioner Courts meeting, which is at 9 a.m. We will go back and check on Basecamp to make sure all the dates are right. And I think that's about it.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you for your time. We'll hang back for a little bit if you have questions. Otherwise, the meeting is adjourned and we will see you April 26th at the Commissioner's Court meeting.
Jamie, I had a question for the city.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I figured we should talk.
Is there where we at on the marketing? I guess the last time we talked about was the marketing, and then we had, you know, that ice storm in February. We didn't do much, so
right.
That was going to be the step. I mean, where we go from here?
You just let me know how we need to pay for a newspaper ad if that's what you want to push, and we'll figure out how to do that on our end.